All right, well, welcome. It's good to see all y'all here. And we've got a couple of people I know really well, and a couple of you I think are relatively new students or patrons, and I'm not super familiar with you yet. So welcome. We're not going to do a lot of introductions or social stuff today. We're mostly going to kind of get right into the meat and potatoes of the project. And yeah, it should be a good time. So I think I'll start out with a little bit of a brief overview of what we've been up to, some of the stuff we've seen so far, and then I'm hoping that some of you have prepared some questions, and we'll kind of let it be more of a free form Q&A, and kind of everything is on the table as far as what's going on, what's not going well, prep, what this has us thinking about for the future. Feel free to ask pretty much everything. If there's something I can't tell you or don't feel comfortable telling you, I can draw that boundary on my own. So feel free to ask. So we are here in kind of the northeastern corner of Guatemala, if you can kind of imagine near where Belize, Mexico, and Guatemala all meet. That's about where we're stationed. And we're working on a multi-carnivore species survey. So their target focus animal is jaguars, but as part of this food web analysis, they're also basically interested in any other carnivore scat that we can find. So most likely other target species that we're getting quite a bit of have been ocelot and puma. And then we've picked up at least one scat that was likely gray fox. Coyote scats are possible, but we haven't seen anything that looks like it's coyote yet. And then technically margay, tayra, and jaguarundi scats are also possible. But those three are they're much smaller kind of mesocarnivores. Kind of margays are like house cat sized. Jaguarundis are that size, maybe a little bit bigger. Tayras are kind of think like a fisher for our North Americans. And they're all quite a bit more arboreal as well. So particularly for our margays, we actually suspect that most of their scat is ending up in the trees, and therefore would be a little bit challenging for the dogs to find. But we'll see when all the genetic results come back if we did manage to pick up any of those scats. The other thing that we're dealing with here is that the training scats we were given were only jaguar, puma, ocelot, and then we had one sample of gray fox. But we actually didn't have any training samples of margay, jaguarundi, or tayra. So we're just kind of hoping that if the dogs come across those scats, they are able to generalize. And we are working in a project with Ellen Dimmitt, who is a PhD candidate at Oregon State University. Her advisor, Tal Levy, is someone we've talked to, I've been talking to on and off for a couple of years now about potentially doing a PhD project with. Ellen's going to be coming on the podcast, so you'll hear a little bit more about her background and how we met there. As far as our training and prep for this project was in early December. I actually was coming through here anyway on my way south, and I made sure to make a detour over to the town of Flores, which is where I am right now, to the Wildlife Conservation Society headquarters here. There are other project partners, WCS Guatemala, and picked up a nice big bag of dehydrated scats to start training the dogs with. And that kind of leads into one of the challenges that is, again, not atypical with conservation dog stuff that we've been working through here. The scats that we were given were very dehydrated and quite old. So they were kind of dehydrated to the point where if you took one of the turds and kind of smooshed it a little bit, they just turned to dust. So that was a kind of a concern from day one, and has borne out to be a difficulty, particularly for Niffler, in that Niffler seems to be struggling a lot more than barley with kind of making that logic leap from the dehydrated samples that we were trained on to the much fresher samples. We did quite a bit of work with those samples to make sure the boys were as ready as they could be. I tried a couple little experimental things as far as misting the scats a little bit to try to rehydrate them. Putting them out intentionally in really wet environments so that they could kind of absorb some humidity from the environment. And then the other big thing that we were doing in preparation for this project was trying to get both of the boys' search stamina up. For Barley, kind of back up to where he was at when he was doing black-footed ferret research when we were at Working Dogs for Conservation, and for Niffler getting him up to a search scale he's never done before. So we were also really pushing in our training logs, making sure that we're kind of gradually increasing that search duration for each of them. And then last week was our first week here. There was a bit of an unexpected snafu. Snafu for us, a much more serious thing for the rest of the world. On Friday of the week before last, so now about 10 days ago, an American tourist went missing here. And that meant that on Monday and Tuesday, we were not able to enter our study area because all of the staff for that study area were involved in the search, and we are required to have a staff member with us as we're doing any research. So we had to kind of invent a little bit on Monday and Tuesday, and ended up searching 2 different kind of nearby reserves, one public, one private, and just hoping that we could pick up some samples, but knew that both of those areas were less surveyed and a little bit less likely to be fruitful. So we've kind of counted those days as half days, both training days for the dogs, getting them up and running, and also just kind of knowing that they weren't really in our target area, and potentially there was just very, very little target density out there. Since then, we have been in the park where we're supposed to be. And we have collected, Barley probably got about 20 scats this week. Niffler has only found 2, and we can get into a little bit of some of that disparity and some of the things we're working on around it. And so far, it looks like most of our scats are falling into those expected 3 categories of jaguar, puma, and ocelot. Some of them we can be pretty confident about just by eyeballing them, and some of them it's going to take some DNA analysis to know for sure. Sí, gracias. Sí, gracias. And that kind of takes us to one other thing that's been interesting. We knew that this was likely to be the case, but here in the neotropics, our scat degrades incredibly quickly. So a lot of our samples kind of look like they're just a ball of hair. That's pretty typical for jaguar because they are eating things like peccaries that are just really hairy. But also basically the bugs are going through and eating all of the good stuff and just leaving piles of hair behind. For this particular study, because they're really particularly interested in food web analysis, so therefore they're basically taking these samples, taking them to the genetics lab, and amplifying whatever DNA is available. They really just want to know what the animals have eaten, so only having bones and hair is not a big deal for them. But if we were much more interested in kind of how closely related given jaguars are to each other, or hormonal statuses or those sorts of things, some of the samples that we've collected so far probably would be too degraded for that sort of thing. So that's been fun to see. One of the other struggles we've had so far, not really a struggle, but something that has definitely come up is, as many of us who maybe have been around intact cats know, cats can spray and mark territory, and they like to leave little scratches in the dirt. And both dogs have been showing some amount of interest in those. Barley was alerting to them for the first day or 2, and now has started to only alert when there is something there, or there are some where we think there must have been something there recently, but haven't been able to find it anymore. And then there's been a couple really interesting ones where Barley has really kind of cast up into shrubs and bushes and almost tried to alert to the underside of leaves. So there we're thinking they must be spray sites. Potentially anal gland expressions, we're not really sure. We can't confirm it, and it's not useful for the data, so he's not currently being rewarded for those, but it's been kind of fun to see. I think that is the really broad update right now. We've got about another week to a week and a half of surveys left. We're going to do 5 days of surveys this coming week, and then probably 2 days the week after that to kind of round out and get kind of our 2 first days. As we mentioned, we're not quite counting as full survey days as far as what we promised them 10 survey days and a couple training days. So we're going to end up with about 12 days total in the field. And I think, you know, this has always been best practice, and this is a really good project illustrating why kind of at a minimum you would want to do it at 2 weeks of work, because we have really seen Barley, probably by day 3 or 4, really looked like he was very confident and knew what he was doing and knew what he was searching for. And Niffler, honestly, it's been kind of over this weekend doing more brush up training with him, but he's really starting to look like he gets it. So a really good reminder that particularly with new projects, unfamiliar search scale, unfamiliar search environment, you probably wouldn't want to promise that you could do work in just a week. So I've got a bunch more like little anecdotes and stories that I can share, but I'm going to pause here and see if anyone has any questions right up top. What's that?
Sorry, I had my microphone not muted. I was telling Fiona to not go crazy on the fence right now.
That would explain why I didn't understand that. Yeah, well, any questions then, or shall I just start launching into stories?
I have one question, if that's okay. Hey, thanks for doing this. This is amazing. Like, it's not very often you get the chance to kind of chat about a project like this. So especially while you're still there. So thank you.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, like, did you have to put much prep into acclimatizing the dogs? How have they coped with like the heat and the humidity? And did you have to kind of allow some time for that? And yeah, are you noticing any changes as well as they get more used to it?
Yeah, I think one of the blessings of how this project has worked out is that I was already in Latin America when the project came up. This project actually, and again, this podcast episode is going to come out shortly, but you know, if you're on Patreon, you get to hear it early. I basically tweeted some complaints about crossing the border into Mexico, and Tal follows me on Twitter and messaged and actually commented. He didn't even message me asking if I was interested in doing carnivore work in Guatemala. And I commented back saying yes, and then commented back again saying, I'll shoot you an email. And that's where this project has come from. So I think the fact that I was already in Latin America, probably is pretty much what got us the contract. The lab basically had enough of a slush fund that they were able to just add this at the last minute. But then as far as acclimating the dogs, I was already in Mexico in November when we started talking about this project. So the dogs have been in Central America now for almost 3 months, and kind of up and down Central America as well. Here in Flores today, it's actually a little chilly. I could be wearing a long sleeve shirt right now. It's just been rainy. But it's probably been Fahrenheit, like 85 Fahrenheit-ish most days, so pretty toasty. What we've been doing as far as preparation of the last couple of months for that is really just living here. I did see, though, over the first 2 days in particular, Barley learning how to pace himself better and not run around like a crazy man for the first 20 minutes of the search and really burn himself out. So he's definitely been drinking less water and needing fewer breaks starting kind of days 3 and 4. At day 5, he was able to do almost a 3-hour search with just, you know, plenty of like short water breaks, but really only one big, like, all right, we're going to like lie down, we're going to sit, we're going to like cool down for a couple minutes. And I think as much of that has been kind of the dogs practicing self-regulation as acclimation. All right, Kaisa, gosh.
Hi.
Just help me with pronunciation. I'm sorry.
It's fine. So I was wondering if Niffler only had found 2 samples, how do you handle it with like reward system and making sure that he gets rewarded enough so that he doesn't lose interest or enthusiasm in the search?
Yeah, so this opens kind of the biggest can of worms that I think we'll probably talk about on the podcast at some point in like a year, but right now is something that is going to kind of stay within the student Patreon group. Niffler has been really struggling on this project. So part of the discrepancy in it's a little bit of a catch-22. So part of the discrepancy in the numbers he's finding is because he's showing a little bit less reliability. We've been using him primarily on the search areas that are likely to be less productive, and we're prioritizing Barley for the areas that are most likely to be highly productive. So Barley's, in some ways, Barley is searching more, and Barley is also searching the areas that we know are most likely to have latrine sites or be kind of mega corridors. The area that Niffler searched on Thursday, at the end of the search, I asked the WCS guy that was searching with me how many scats they had found there last year, and he said, "Oh, we've never found anything on that trail." So it is a little bit of an unfortunate catch-22. And again, as part of it is just that he's searching less and he's searching those less productive areas. And then I've made a couple mistakes as I've been training him, and we're hoping that almost all of this is my fault and my mistakes, and it's not going to affect his long-term viability and long-term career. But that is also something we're starting to keep an eye on, is make sure that Niffler actually is going to want this job and is going to be able to be kind of a full-time, all-terrain detection dog. It is hard, Caroline, yeah. And we've got a plan that we'll go into here momentarily to kind of try to make sure that he doesn't need to go into a career change situation, but also if that's what he kind of shows that he would rather do. He's got a literal list of people who want to take him from me. So he's gonna be fine, and most of those people actually would be very happy to have him part-time and then let us take him back if we want to do wind farm work with him or other projects that may be better suited to his skill set, again, depending on how things go. So the other mistake that I believe I have made with him over this project is the first day Niffler didn't really get to search because there was just really only one trail at the area that we were searching, and Barley searched the first 45 minutes out, 45 minutes back, and there weren't any forks. So in order to get Niffler to an area that Barley hadn't searched, we would have had to get 45 minutes into the trail, and it was just too late to even start that. Then the second day, we went and searched this area called Yasha, and Niffler alerted to several sites that he seemed very insistent and confident on. That we could see maybe some scratch marks in the duff. It's actually surprisingly easy to see these areas where these cats have moved leaf litter aside. I did not expect it to be that obvious. And I chose not to reward him. And I think that was a mistake. Because now what we have seen is it seems like he's just kind of like, well, I don't know what it is then. And going forward, I've made the decision that I am going to reward him for these, they're rascadores in Spanish, these little like scratch spots, because I can see them. There is jaguar scent there or mountain lion scent there. So it's kind of it's going to be a good thing to kind of boost his confidence and enthusiasm. And it's not a big deal to reward him extra. And again, I think that was kind of an error on my part. Sometimes I struggle switching back and forth between the two dogs, and I'm so used to handling Barley, and that's the sort of thing that I shouldn't reward Barley for, because actually we'll get into another story in a moment about things that Barley cannot be rewarded for because he will generalize so quickly. So remind me to bring that one up because it's funny. And Niffler is not that dog. Niffler is not going to generalize that easily, and Niffler is much quicker to assume that he is wrong and he should therefore never do something ever again, which makes him very easy to live with in a lot of ways. But yeah, so I think I made a mistake in treating him too much like Barley on day 2. And yeah, going forward, he's going to get rewarded for those. Go ahead, Megan.
Oh, no, I don't have a question.
Okay, talking to Merlin.
Yeah, sorry.
Say hey to him. So yeah, those are kind of some of the mistakes I've made with Niffler. And then the other thing that I'm kind of noticing, and this may or may not be related to what I was just saying about potentially not rewarding him in situations where I should have, is that I think Niffler is struggling a little bit more with that generalization from like an old dehydrated sample to those really fresh samples. So what we've done starting on Friday, so now it's been 3 days, is we're taking the really fresh samples that Barley has found and we're training Niffler really hard on those in these really short, really fast, really fun sessions, where the first couple times it was literally just click treat for, or click ball for even showing interest in one case, and then now to getting nose to source, he didn't even have to alert, and we're doing quite a bit of that. And then as of today, he was actually showing a change of behavior at about 2 meters away, which is about the detection distance we're seeing with Barley. sourcing and alerting right away. So I'm hoping that that has made a big difference, and we're going to continue that for the rest of this week until we start seeing Niffler's numbers come back up a little bit more, where Barley, every time Barley finds something that we pretty much know is what Niffler needs to be finding, we're going to take half of that sample for genetic analysis, half the sample for Niffler, train Niffler really hard with those. And then other things that could be and probably are going on with Niffler are, this is his first time doing a search that's anywhere near this big in a system that is anywhere near this complicated. He's used to wind farm work, which is just sprinting around in the prairie, and these bats have giant odor plumes that are in very clear cones. So, you know, if he's running around, if he hits that odor cone, it in most cases is going to be obvious, and then he just needs to go upwind. The other thing we're seeing here, so that's kind of a search scale, search complexity thing. The odor here, the odor movement is a little bit more complicated. The high humidity is really good for kind of volatility. It keeps things moving in the air. But it also means we've watched Barley in a couple places have to work for 3 minutes, just really like going back and forth and out and back and like casting up into the trees and then coming back and like checking buttresses and like eventually finding a scat. And in some cases, he's done that twice in the same spot. This happened on Friday. He did this twice in the same spot, once on the way out, once on the way back, for like 3 minutes each time, and couldn't find anything. And, you know, it could have been eaten. It could have been buried. There could have been nothing there. It could have been a margay scat up a tree. But I think that sort of thing is also a little bit harder for Niffler. Niffler has done a lot less of these kind of complicated odor puzzles. And particularly if his confidence has plummeted because of my mistakes and because of just kind of realities with our training samples, he may kind of be both lacking in confidence and skill to resolve some of those things. And he's getting tired. So there's a lot going on with poor little Niffy right now. But I'm feeling a lot better after kind of seeing what I saw this weekend with him kind of picking up on some of Barley's samples. All right, Kaisa?
Oh, yeah. I recently listened to the podcast where we talked, gosh, I don't remember her name, but about blood tracking, and that they used the younger, more inexperienced dog to go first, and then like the older or more experienced one to go off after to look. Is that something that you could do with Niffler, to have him on these places where you think that you might find more, and he can take a lap, and then you can take Barley out to like double check?
Yeah, I think that's going to be something. It kind of depends on what the search plan is for the day and how many areas they have planned for us and how long each area is. But I think that's something I'm going to ask for us to be able to do this coming week. It's just going to kind of depend on, for example, on Friday, we actually only had one trail to search, but it was a 3-hour long trail. So we did it with Barley, took a bunch of the samples that he had found, and then went and put them out again for Niffler so that they were known. But yeah, that's a great idea and something we're thinking about trying to get done. I'm going to take a quick look at the chat because I saw a bunch of questions kind of coming through there. So iPhone 3, I don't know who that is. Oh, that's you, Jerry. Asked if I usually drive or fly. Currently we're driving. I think in the future, had I been stationed in Montana when we got this job, we would have flown, and we probably would have only brought one dog in that case. And we did actually, when we were sending out a quote for this project, we sent them quotes for both flying and driving. And ultimately it ended up making more sense for us to drive, but we had been considering flying because I spent New Year's Eve in Costa Rica with my family. So I was actually like 4 countries away and then had to backtrack all the way up to Guatemala for this project. So it was on the table, and I've just instead, spend a lot of time at the Nicaraguan border mostly. Diana asked, I also work in Central and South America. Do we worry about dogs searching and bad snakes? Yes. The first couple nights of this trip, every single night, I had a different nightmare about my dogs being murdered by some horrifying animal. And definitely that's like the thing I was most worried about. I spoke to a veterinarian in Costa Rica, and they actually sold me antivenom that works for fer-de-lance, bushmaster, and rattlesnakes. So I actually have that on hand, and we're just leaving it in the field vehicle every day. So if something is to happen, we have that and we know how to use it. Antivenin is really nasty stuff. In some cases, it's better to not use it. But if the dog is really kind of going into anaphylaxis and you might be losing the dog, then you will use it. But yeah, it's definitely something we're really worried about. This kind of ties in one of the things that I have to be really careful of with Barley. I think on Thursday, our 4th day of searching, Barley showed some interest in something enough that I kind of came over to investigate, and it turned out to be the shed skin of like a 2-meter boa. And I then kind of had to make this like decision to be like, oh, no, yeah, like give like a verbal correction and get him away from it. And then like go and put him away so that we could all come over and look at it. Because for Barley, had I been like, whoa, cool, and like picked it up after he showed interest in it, then congratulations, I've trained Barley to find snakes. So far we haven't had any run-ins with live snakes, but there's been a lot of kind of having to navigate like the search strategy, time of day, preparing our med kits appropriately, and knock on wood, so far we haven't seen any live fer-de-lances or anything else really scary. Barley did find a dead fer-de-lance the other day, and kind of same situation. As soon as I realized what it was, he got kind of yelled at and got a pretty harsh like get out of there sort of reaction, which he gets very rarely from me, and hopefully helped make the impression of like that is not the sort of odor that we want you interested in any way, shape, or form. Both of my dogs historically have shown kind of a natural aversion to rattlesnakes, but I'm not entirely sure how much that translates over to snakes that don't make scary noises. Not that this has happened, but I'm curious what the vet plan is, asks Taylor. We have veterinarians kind of here in Flores, which is about an hour and a half away from our study site. So that's the plan, is to get in here. We did not like contact a veterinarian and get someone on board and ready to go with us before. You know, like we didn't do the thing where we like called them and prepared with them and everything, simply because there just aren't many veterinarians here that would really understand that. So it's more if something happens, we're just going to be going to the nearest vet, and we're also going to so many different study sites. The nearest vet varies from day to day. If we reward for any Caroline asks if she's wondering if you reward for any awareness of the species. It's a bit of a logistical nightmare to flip from one to the other. For Barley right now, we're not rewarding for anything that we can't find and collect. For Niffler, as I said, going forward, I'm going to be rewarding him for anything that I can kind of visually confirm that there's reasonable suspicion that there was something there, and just really get his confidence back up. And you know, again, it's not the thing that's slowing them down that much. It actually has been interesting. Both of them have found multiple dead birds on this trip. And Niffler actually found a dead shrew the other day, which I rewarded him for. And then funnily enough, we told the biologist about it later, Ellen, and she was like, wait, do you know where it is? We need that for the metabar coding study. So we had to go back and find it again and bring it back so she can analyze the DNA so that, and they can actually then use that to add to the database to then be able to identify things that the animals are eating. So yeah, at this point, it's going to depend from dog to dog, which I think is a really good reminder for all of us, myself included. I have such a tendency to train all dogs like they're Barley, and they're just not. So Katie asks, mentioned a few days of training in your schedule there. Could you expand on that, please? Are you providing the crew there with scent detection training? Not for the crew, but when we were speaking with the OSU folks, originally it had been hoped that we were actually going to arrive here a week or so after Ellen. She was going to be able to go out and kind of do her visual on foot surveys, collect a bunch of fresh samples for us, and then we would be able to spend a couple days working with fresh samples in situ in like 15 to 20 minute, like easier searches with our fresh samples to kind of ramp the dogs up. That ended up not working out because her flights, one flight was delayed and then she missed 2 flights in a row, and it was like a mess for her to get here. So we ended up all starting work on Monday, and that I think is kind of a big part of the reason that Niffler is struggling so much. We actually lost out on those planned training days where we were going to take the dogs to known latrine sites and really kind of gently ramp them up. Barley was able take a flying leap into the project, and Niffler has not. So it wasn't so much training for them, but more ideally, if you're working with a new target and or a new area, you want to get there and and we just charge a little bit that less, like in our like giant budget spreadsheet that we use to calculate how much we're charging a client, we charge a little bit less for those like in situ discrimination or in situ training days, and then a little bit more for like a full survey day. Do you ever worry about the carnivores we're trying to find? We're thinking jaguar. No, but we did see a jaguar on our second day of surveys, or third day of surveys, which we absolutely did not expect to get to see one. The Ellen, the biologist who spent 3 months here last year, that was the first jaguar she's ever seen. And it was funny, I had actually just rewarded Niffler for finding the gray fox scat, and someone says jaguar, and I kind of like look up and look around as I'm tugging with Niffler, and it was just like down the trail, crossing the trail. It was a young one, so at first I was like, that's not a jaguar, it's an ocelot. And then Tony got it in her binoculars and was like, nope, that's got rosettes, that's definitely bigger than an ocelot. So no, we're not worried about them. We're in a group of like 6 or 7 people, and neither dog is ranging super far from us. It's certainly possible, but we're not as worried about it as we would be in, say Africa, where you've just got so many more predators at such higher densities. So far not a big concern. It's really just jaguars and mountain lions that we would be worried about, and they're all pretty shy around here. Yana asks if we can visually confirm the dog has alerted on the target species, not a scat, not another predator scat. And actually, you missed this, Yana, but we're looking for all predators here. So any scat that looks like a predator scat counts, which has been really nice. It's not like we have to try to only reward for jaguar and ignore mountain lion or something like that, which would be quite a bit more challenging. And quite frankly, we probably wouldn't be able to, and they would just have to deal with genetics lab fees because some of these scats are so degraded. It would be really, really challenging, if not impossible. Some of them you can kind of tell based on behavior. Jaguars don't latrine quite as much as mountain lions. So we had one latrine site that Barley found that had 3 scats right on top of each other. That was almost certainly mountain lion. And then the jaguar scats, as I said, tend to be really hairy. It's almost like a clod of hair, and it's like poofy. It looks like a dust bunny. So, at like the extreme ends, you can kind of tell, but would be pretty challenging. And luckily it's not something that they need to do for this project. Megan says that she had a similar issue with the latch project we worked on. They ended up doing a week of remedial work in the middle to translate to scat. And yeah, it like, we're lucky that we had Barley, so we didn't have to like fully pause fieldwork. But if Barley's TBL surgery recovery hadn't gotten to the point that it's at, we would have, I think, also had to pretty much put pause on things after day 2 and say, all right, we need to go back to the drawing board. We'll stay here longer. We're not going to charge y'all extra for this. But if we didn't have Barley here to pick it up, we would have had to do the same thing.
Oh, we totally charged them for it.
Yeah, I think we would have charged for the time, but we would have been charging separately for the surveys, and just not charge them for like those full survey days, as I said. Oh, and Christine says they've got jaguars on the nesting beaches and have never had any problems. They do sometimes take dogs from homes close by, but usually prefer sea turtles. Yeah, that's so far that hasn't seemed to be a big concern for us. We're really more worried about snakes and then like tick-borne diseases. Barley had like 30 ticks on Thursday, and he's got his Bravecto and Interceptor and everything on board, so they're dying, but he's still had a lot of tick bites. And there's no Lyme down here, but who knows what else there is. And like, you guys don't even want to know what my legs look like from these like mites that apparently I'm allergic to. I have like massive boils everywhere. All right, Kaisa asks, how do you go about training for later projects now when they are rewarded for and desired to generalize target species? It's going to depend on the project. That's kind of something that Barley has always had within him, and something he has always struggled with or kind of shown a tendency for. So kind of the same thing as I've always had to do with Barley, which is that if there's something that is likely to trip him up that is not visually distinguishable, just having a big conversation with the project partners about, well, how important is it that we don't pick this up? Is there any chance that it could be useful that we do? Exploring those sorts of conversations. And I think honestly with Niffler, he's not likely to become a generalizer because of this training. I think that's likely something that's pretty temperamentally solid for him. And I think he's probably going to always require a little bit more work to get up to a generalizing ability. So I don't think teaching them this lesson now is going to necessarily change their tendencies in the future, but stay tuned. We'll get back to you on that after our next project. I have thought a little bit about, now both dogs are going to be trained on mountain lion scat. So that is going to be something that, mountain lions are pretty much from Alaska to Argentina, pretty much anywhere in North America. We could conceivably have mountain lion scat. Luckily, they're not red foxes, so it's not like we're going to run into one every quarter mile. And it's pretty visually distinctive. So if that's something that we don't want to be collecting, I'll be able to reward for it and move on, just like we've been doing with the birds. It's been kind of cool to have them find some dead tropical birds. And it's been nice as like a little enthusiasm boost for them. So not super worried about that yet. Which actually takes me to our funny, this is our ridiculous Barley story. So as I said, Barley is a very easy generalizer. On Wednesday, as we're out on transect, one of the local guys, Tony, came up to me. So we have two Tonys on project. One is my field tech, and then one is one of the WCS guys. Came up and offered me this. It's Chico Sapote, I think is what it's called. And it's like a wild fruit that's kind of similar to an apricot. And he offered it to me, and I ate a little bit of it, and then I shared a little bit with Barley, and then shared a little bit with Tony, the other Tony. And then we kind of went on our merry way after our little break. Didn't really think anything of it. The next day, Barley found 8 Chico Sapotes on the floor throughout his 2-hour search. He was only alerting to the open ones that had been eaten a little bit by a monkey or a bird. But over the course of our search, he only found 2 scats that day. And otherwise it was 8 Chico Sapotes. It was every 20 minutes he went off trail, and beautiful sourcing, the tail wags, it looked like he was on odor. And then this beautiful alert, and then he just sat there and waited with a slice of Chico Sapote. Luckily, over the course of the day, as I kind of figured out that this is what was happening and started, went from not rewarding to actually being no search, and using the low kind of disappointed mom voice with him, and re-queuing a search. He started showing less and less of an alert, and a little bit more of just a little slight change of behavior, or he would pause and stand near them. What we also started doing was I sent one of the other project partners over to look, and if they could see a Chico Sapote, I didn't go over, because for Barley, me even approaching with the ball in my bag is enough of a dopamine hit to keep a behavior going. So I sent someone else over to look. And then luckily on Friday, he didn't find any. So it was just this weird single day blip that is very classic Barley. And as I said, he is a very easy generalizer, and is absolutely the sort of dog that with a novice handler that was a little bit too generous about rewarding because they felt bad for how hard the dog had worked, you could very easily end up ruining him. And I'm pretty lucky so far I haven't. So, yeah. Yeah, Barley is very funny. It was, luckily everyone was pretty good natured about it. It was a little embarrassing by the 4th or 5th or 6th one. It's 6 people in our group, and they're all watching my dog just find this forest fruit over and over and over again. And he didn't even get his ball for it. I just fed him a little bit, and he saw me show interest in it. So. Yeah, what other questions? I'm trying to think if I had any other big anecdotes or kind of lessons learned I wanted to share with everyone, but I think I'm getting pretty close to the end.
I have a question.
Great.
So you're collecting scat, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And so can you take us through the steps, when you find it, How do you collect it? What do you put it in? What information do you take,
Yeah.
etc.?
I'll share what I know because, as I said, we've got a group of like 6 people right now. So more or less when we find the scat, I am getting visual confirmation that it's there, which sometimes takes 3 people and 5 minutes to confirm that it's there because cats like to bury their scat. But as soon as we've got visual confirmation, then I'm off rewarding the dog and keeping them from drooling on the sample more. And so I know we're taking our GPS points. Very simple naming protocol that we're using here. It's basically the name of the site and the number of the scat. And that's it. And then they're just putting in bags and putting them in the freezer right now. They're not getting stored in alcohol or anything like that at this point, as far as I can tell. They might be getting transferred in at various points, but as far as I know right now, our freezer is just full of plastic bags of scat. So it seems like it's pretty simple. The process seems like it's been pretty fast, but as I said, I'm usually kind of off tugging with the dog or fetching with the dog a little ways away to make sure. Barley in particular likes to go back and refine things and drool on them. And that could be problematic for these studies.
And one other quick question, are they always identifiable, or sometimes you're like, this might be this, or it might be this, we're just going to collect it and put a question mark?
Yeah, more the second one. Most of them are identifiable. Most of them, you can see bone, you can see hair. If there's bone and hair in it, it's something we're interested in for this study. We did have one weird little like tapered scat that was only like this big around and like this long that Ellen decided not to collect. And then like an hour later was like, I should have collected that. That could have been a juvenile Tara. Yeah, it's so far it's more kind of as long as we can see bones or hair or kind of have a reason to believe it looks like at least an omnivore's scat, then we're collecting it. Barley actually the other day alerted to vomit that Ellen was like, this is great, you know, and I was like, okay, I mean, if we don't care that he's also finding vomit, like great, we'll alert for vomit. And basically the rule we've got currently with Ellen is if she thinks it's good enough to collect, then Barley's getting rewarded. As I said, going forward, Niffler's going to get rewarded for anything that we kind of have really good reason to believe he's right about, even if it's not necessarily kind of confirmable or not necessarily collectible. Just for now to see if that really helps bring his spirits and confidence back up, because he has found a couple scats so far. But we really want to see him kind of turning on and looking like the dog that we know he can be on wind farms, and hopefully he can be in the jungle. Yana asked, how are we structuring our search day? How long do we search before break? How long are the breaks? Imagine the scats are detectable with normal breathing, not high intensity sniffing. Yeah, I mean, both dogs are panting pretty hard in the fields right now. It's 86 degrees, which can someone do a quick Fahrenheit to Celsius for me and then type that into the chat? It's hot. And our detection distances are like 2 or 3 meters in most cases, so they're not extraordinarily. Barley has had a couple that might be more than that, but most of them seem to be, yeah, 2 to 3 meters detection distance. I am in charge of all of our timing, which is really nice. Most of these trails are practically never ending out and backs. So I've been aiming for 2 to 3 hour searches with Barley, and then 1 to 2 hour searches with Niffler. And we've been taking a lot of micro breaks. So both dogs have kind of learned that if they stop and look at me, I'll ask, do you want some water? And if they do want water, they can approach me, and then they get water kind of out of my camelback. They both are able to drink out of the camelback. And if they don't want water, then they can go back to searching. Then kind of wait for them to swallow enough that they can start searching again, because Barley has a habit of drinking so much water so fast that then I tell him to search and he gets so excited that he chokes. The guys have started laughing pretty hard about that, because it seems like Barley is starting every single rep with coughing. Yes, and drinking out of the camelback is a really good skill. And calculator says 30 degrees Celsius, so it's hot. And then for the longer searches, if I'm really starting to see that kind of spatula tongue, so when the tongue is kind of coming out and then like, boop, you know, spatula shaped, spoon shaped, I will tell the dogs to lie down and kind of actually with Barley in particular, I have to sit down with him and also take a break. If I stay standing, Barley will like lie down for a couple seconds and then get up and start trying to search again. And then I'll kind of keep offering water and sit with them kind of until they look better. So it's very kind of feel based right now, Yana. I know that's not something that we love, but it's very much so kind of what we're seeing out of the search focus and intensity and body language of kind of heat and exhaustion before then deciding how long a break needs to be and what sort of break they need. And yeah, Taylor said it would be cool to hear more about decisions to rehome or change dogs in a podcast, whether or not Niffler does. Yeah, I think in about a year, when I've got a much better grasp on what's happening with Niffler, that's definitely going to be a podcast episode. I don't want to be too public about it too early, particularly if he does decide to stay. I would hate to have project partners hear us questioning too much his abilities and then be like, well, we don't want to work with Niffler.
He's so young.
He is young. He's about 2 years and 4 months. So he's young, he's inexperienced, and I've been trying to really remind myself that, particularly on that black-footed ferret project with Barley all those years ago, I also had times where I thought Barley couldn't do this work because it's so easy now with the dog that he is today to be like, Barley is my do everything dog. I can always just take him anywhere and have him do anything, and he reads my mind, and he's magical, and he's perfect, and he can do everything. And that's true, but it wasn't true when he was 5, and Niffler's only 2. Niffler has, I will say, he's always lacked the oomph that I really want. He's never had that same like bite that Barley has of like, he will, like Barley, I hope some of you get to meet him one day because he is one of those dogs where like, as soon as people meet him, they're like, oh, this is a different dog. He really has that spark and that drive and like, you know, you have to sit on his leash and physically remove all fetchable objects from the vicinity sometimes because he will bring you pieces of paper and put them in your lap 50 times in a row. And I don't necessarily want that out of a dog because I don't know if that's really healthy, but there is kind of a happy, there's a space approaching where Barley is that I think is a little bit better for the sort of work that we're asking them to do. And Niffler's he's a lot less obsessive. He's got a lot more hobbies. He's kind of he's a softer, gooberier dog. And I'm hoping that doesn't mean he can't work, but we'll see. So yeah, there's a lot to be thinking about there. And I think I'm feeling a lot better now that I've identified more of my mistakes going forward or in the past with Niffler. And like, that makes me feel a little bit more like, okay, I have a plan. If it's skill-based, if it's understanding-based, we know how to fix that. If fundamentally the problem comes down to his drive and his interest in doing this work, that's not something that is nearly as fixable and as movable necessarily. During those minutes while we are confirming, are the dogs doing the alert? Yes. Generally for Barley, I have to tell him to back up and get him to move out of the way so that we can kind of search more appropriately. And again, he's not like panting onto the sample if there is a sample there. Both dogs do also have like a pinpoint cue, so a show me cue, and they are supposed to then like get their nose onto it. And then we can actually see it a little bit more easily, but they are basically holding their alert. They don't have to hold it in like a formal way, but both of them pretty much hold it while we're looking on their own. Madison asks, is it possible that the density of predators would be higher from the trailhead, and are there plans to backpack out? Yeah, funnily enough, the jaguar we saw was like 200 meters from camp. He was like right in the parking lot, basically. So what we do see, so like ocelots, for example, are either quite close to human civilization and they're eating a lot of rats, or they're way the heck out there in the middle of nowhere where humans are not eating paca and agouti. So they either have to be close enough to humans to eat the rats or far enough away that the humans aren't eating their other prey source. So like in a lot of these intermediate areas, we're not getting ocelot. Then on the flip side, ocelots kind of inversely vary with our jaguars and mountain lions, particularly the jaguars, because the jaguars will eat them. So these areas where we're getting a lot of jaguar scat, at first I asked Ellen, I was like, is it weird that we're not getting ocelot scat? Because we had 2 ocelot scats our first day and haven't had any since. And she was like, no, if we're getting all this jaguar scat, we wouldn't expect to be seeing ocelot. So it really varies from place to place. We've been in a couple places where we would expect there to be a lot of gray foxes, and the dogs didn't find much, which could be that they only had 1 training sample of gray fox. Could be any number of things. It's really hard to just not know whether they're missing stuff or not. It could just not be there. Yeah, so it varies. We're not planning on backpacking out at all, but we are this coming week. So the last week we were doing all day trips to these various little parks, and one really big park. This coming week we're doing 1 day trip, and then the second half of the week we're going much further into the park. It's like, I can't remember how many hours it is, but like the van can't go. We have to be in a 4x4. We're probably going to get stuck at some point and have to get out and push. So we're going to be much further out there, and we expect to probably get more ocelot scats then. And if they had the budget for us to stay around a 3rd week, there's actually a 3rd site that's even up closer to the Mexican border that actually involves like 8 hours on ATVs to get there. We're not doing that one partially because we're not here for long enough, and partially they weren't really sure if the dogs could do ATVs. And I'm not sure if the dogs could do ATVs, but I think we could probably figure it out. That's not something they've been trained for, but they've done boats and planes and canoes and paddleboards and stuff. I think we could probably make it work. So yeah, there's a lot of, I'm bummed that we're not going to get up to that 3rd site, because that is where they got like 80% of their ocelot scats last year and where they got their only potential margay scat. So it's a little bit of a bummer we can't get the dogs up there. Sonia asked, do most dogs' detecting skills become better as they age and mature, or do certain type of dogs just excel quickly and kind of plateau? That's a good question, and honestly one that I have been, as I've been particularly kind of like doing all my thinking about Niffler, been thinking about reaching out to, Paul Bunker, Skylos, a couple of these other really experienced folks, and asking them. I suspect it's breed dependent in some ways. And the way that I personally expect or believe it will go is that skills and expertise and confidence should continue growing pretty much lifelong. But that drive level and that, interest in the work, I would expect to more or less solidify somewhere around that 2 or 3 year age mark. Still like that stamina and endurance may continue to mature, but I wouldn't necessarily expect to take a dog at 18 months who's just not really interested in toys and have them at 4 years old be like over the top crazy. But I'm not 100% sure about that. I'm not really sure kind of at what point with a young dog most people would really start feeling confident that this dog is not showing them what they need to see. And again, I would expect that to be really breed and line dependent. So it might be the sort of thing that you might not be fair to even really, like, I might ask Paul and Skylos about it just to see what they say, but I have a feeling they might say, well, I work with pointers and they mature differently than border collies, so who knows. Anyone know if insect deterrent can be safely used on dogs for sweat bees? We have not had sweat bee issues. I don't know. Both of my dogs just have Bravecto and Interceptor on board. I did go to a couple agro vets yesterday trying to find a flea collar for Riley as well, so I could double up on Bravecto and a flea collar. Didn't manage to find one. Yeah, we have a bunch of permethrin for our clothes. I don't know if I could soak the dog's harnesses or vests in permethrin or not. That is something I'm going to be looking at next time, I think. Although the Herta visibility vests that we have are supposedly insect repellent vests, and doesn't seem to be making a difference here. But I'm also covered in bug bites, even though I've been covered in permethrin. So I think they're just bad enough here that it doesn't matter. Carolyn says she can imagine the intensity. You can see it in the photos. And yeah, he's a nice, obvious dog. Madero Negro. Yeah, and there's a couple good suggestions for the bug stuff in here. Yeah, and I have been considering, so I have booties for the dogs in my backpack, just in case anyone cuts a paw or starts looking tender-footed. Haven't needed to break those out yet. Barley got a cut above his eyebrow the second day, and I was considering having him in particular work in his goggles, because Barley, this and second anecdote coming from in a second for Barley. Barley is off trail a lot more and pushing through the undergrowth a lot more, and a lot of stuff out here is really spiky. But he works less reliably in his goggles than Niffler. Barley knows how to use his dew claw to hook the goggles off in just like one swipe. So it's pretty frustrating to try to get him to keep them on. So I've chosen not to for him so far. And Niffler doesn't tend to go off trail quite the same way. Niffler, and this is actually something that I think may have come from doing too much hiking training with him. He is really, really, really magnetized to the trail, and sometimes will show a change of behavior and like pause with his nose off to the wind, facing off the trail, and then not source it, not go and do anything, which again could be some amount of kind of confidence and skills, which we're going to come back to, and might also be a little bit of like misunderstanding where normally he is being told to stay on trail, and now I want him to go off trail. So I'm going to say, oh, Barley. So Barley has had, I think at least 3 times now where he has gotten so horribly tangled in vines that I've had to go and like either machete him out or like physically lift him out of vines that he has like managed to like try to barrel through, to the point where he had one where he had vines like across his chest and through his legs, like a full-on harness. And it's just because he just doesn't care about anything and just keeps pushing through until he physically can't move anymore, which has been pretty funny. Again, luckily, I think his coat helps prevent him from getting too scratched up, but it's been pretty funny to kind of like suddenly you hear the bell stop moving, you look over and Barley's just like totally like hog-tied in some vines, just standing there wagging his tail and waiting for you to come rescue him. Kaisa asks, how do you take care of yourself and your mental health during all of this? Both the work and the worries about Niffler sound tough. I am really happy right now. I don't feel like I have been needing to. Yeah, this stuff fills my cup enough that I have not been needing to worry about it. And honestly, even the stuff with Niffler, it's hard, but I think it's been something that's been on my mind with him for almost a year now, that I've kind of been keeping tabs on whether or not I think he's got the grit for this. So it's not like it's coming out of nowhere. It's not like he just like had a sudden catastrophic career-ending injury or something like that, because I think like Barley's CCL tear hit me much harder than this. And I think I feel like I have a good plan for Niffler. I feel like I have kind of a good understanding of contingencies and what we need to do to feel like we've given him the best possible shot at staying. And I am aware that the worst possible thing I could do would be to rush to rehoming him and then later feel like I didn't try everything with him. So I feel pretty good about that. I feel really level-headed about it. And I think it also really helps that my ex, the guy that I was dating, is absolutely obsessed with Niffler and was with me the day that we picked him up from the breeder. And he's an ultra marathoner and lives in Missoula and would take Niffler in a heartbeat, and would also, I believe, quite gladly let us take him back for wind farm work intermittently. I would be able to see him. We have a good relationship. And my dad has also been kind of like offering / asking to take Niffler if he can't stay with us. So I think that helps a lot as well, is that I know that if it comes to that, we've got really good options. I've also been thinking through some creative options for Niffler, as far as he's got a year. He's got until the end of the Pan American Highway for me to make this decision, because right now there's no point in getting rid of him until I'm in a position to bring home another dog. The only reason he needs to leave is because I will need a space for a do everything working dog, and I don't really want to have 3 dogs. So he's got a year. And with that, gosh, where is it going? Today's got a year. Oh, I was going to say something. There was something else there. Oh, we've been thinking through some creative options for him. So one thing that I've been, contemplating is maybe could he be our student teacher dog? Could he be a dog that we loan out to folks like you guys if you want to do your first season on a wind farm and you want to take a turnkey dog for a season? Or muscle work or pre-construction stuff where he's searching 50 acres. Maybe he doesn't have what it takes to do 3-hour searches in the jungle. And that's okay. He still may have a career with canine conservationists doing a lot of other stuff. And particularly, I'm liking the idea of seeing if we could get him into maybe a working light home with some of you all. Like we'll send him out to a different wind farm every year with some of our students or something like that. Again, plan A. Hopefully, he gets to just stick around and be Barley 2.0. But really, he's always going to be Niffler 1.0, which is something I'm constantly having to remind myself in so many different ways. But yeah, I feel good about it, honestly. Yeah, and do you anticipate taking on any other fieldwork projects as you continue south on the trip? Or would it be more like if opportunities come up, would you consider doing one? I'm hoping that other things like this will come up. We've got a couple people we're going to meet up with as we go, but nothing has really materialized to be fieldwork. I'm going to hopefully see Christine the first week of April. I've got anti-venom and get sent tubes for her, so I've got to try to meet up with her in Costa Rica. I'm hoping to also meet up with the Panthera folks who have a scat detection dog in Costa Rica. There's a man in Argentina who is trying to train his own conservation dog, so we're hoping to meet up with him when we get that far south and maybe spend some time with him, just honestly, maybe even just doing some in-person mentoring. And then there's another gentleman in Brazil who has asked if we would be able to make it over to him, but he's pretty far out of the way and it might make sense to have that be a separate trip at some other point. So we're definitely open to it and keeping an eye on it. We've actually had a couple new students from Mexico sign up for the next round of our course. So I'm kind of keeping an eye out for any other interest. And honestly, I've been thinking a lot about potentially staying in Central America going forward. Like just personally, I really love it here. There's a lot of conservation need. I'm not fluent in Spanish, but fluent enough that we could really work really well here and do a lot of good here. So we might end up kind of having a Central American chapter and staying down here. I think there's enough interest and enough work down here to really make that sustainable for us going forward. And also there's less competition. Being based in Montana makes it pretty hard with Rogue, 3 hours up the road one way and Working Dogs for Conservation 20 minutes down the road the other way. So it's been something we've been thinking about anyway, as far as where would we want to move our center of gravity. Somewhere that would be a little bit less competitive in Central America would be really great for that. Wow, what other questions we have? Feeling good? Feeling like we've got anything else? Cool. Well, if anything else comes up or anything else, if anything else comes up, you know how to reach me. Try, if you're comfortable, to post it either in WhatsApp or the Facebook group so other people can read it. But if it's something that for whatever reason you feel like needs to be private, just reach out to me privately over email or WhatsApp, and I'm happy to answer. Obviously, I'm going to be offline for a good chunk of next week, but I'm going to be around before and after that. All right. Well, yeah, have a good rest of your day, everyone. Europe, have a good evening. Australia, have a good Monday. And we'll see y'all. All the Patreon folks will see you in about a week. Bye, everyone.